We'll now go to question time. Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. After releasing a budget that economists from Barrenjoey called inflationary and did nothing to reduce inflation, the ABS said yesterday that increasing interest rates over the year have contributed to living costs rises ranging from 6.3% to 9.6%. The average Australian family must find an additional $22,000 this year to cover the mortgage repayment increases that have happened on your watch, and at the same time as real wages have gone backwards. Is this what the Prime Minister had in mind when he said that he had a plan for cheaper mortgages?
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Minister.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator O'Sullivan for the question and the focus on cost of living, because the government has acknowledged that for many Australian households, they are doing it tough right now. We are in an inflationary environment. The highest inflationary quarter, of course, was under the former government's watch, 2.1% in the March quarter of last year. And we are seeing inflation moderate, which is pleasing, but it's staying higher for longer than we would like. In relation to the budget and the cost of living pressures, cost of living initiatives which we have put in place, that is precisely to deal with those pressures that households are under, whether it be childcare, whether it be cheaper medicines, whether it be the energy bill relief, whether it be the investment in Medicare, whether it be the investment in fee-free TAFE. These are all areas that the government has identified as areas where we can invest, where it will make a real difference in people's household budgets, but it won't add to inflation. And I note Senator O'Sullivan selectively quotes from an economist in his question, and I think if you put 10 economists in a room, you might likely get a few different opinions there. But I will, and the government will, take the advice of the Treasury Secretary and the Governor of the Reserve Bank, who have both confirmed that the government's budget actually put downward pressure on inflation through the energy bill relief and the price caps that we put in place that you opposed. And so had you had your way and we weren't able to progress that important reform, you would have kept prices up higher for longer, and that would have affected household budgets. So we have done the responsible thing, targeted our cost of living relief, but not in a way that adds to inflation, which will hurt households in the long term.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Sullivan, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. ABS data shows that the cost of living for Australian workers, self-funded retirees and pensioners rose again in the June quarter under your Labor government. The data shows that many Australians are taking on additional jobs just to make ends meet in Labor's cost of living crisis. The Prime Minister said in his 2023 New Year resolution that his New Year resolution was to deal with the cost of living crisis. Will he now admit to the Australian people that his resolution and his government's policies have failed?
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Minister Gallagher.
Well, the short answer to that question is no, and the government is absolutely focused on supporting Australians through this cost of living crisis. We accept that people are doing it tough, and that is why we have calibrated and targeted our cost of living relief to those areas where we can make a difference without adding to inflation. Now, I think the opposition's economic plan or economic narrative is very mixed up, because we have people saying we're spending too much, then we have them saying you're not spending enough, and we have a whole range of opinions there. We are very clear about what we have to do. We have to fix the budget and make sure it's in the shape it needs to be, so we can use it for those important investments we need to at the time we need to. We need to grow the economy through our agenda, particularly around fee-free TAFE, around the clean energy transition and the digital economy, and we need to provide cost of living relief where we can without adding to inflation.
Senator O'Sullivan, second supplementary.
ABS data shows an annual rise in food prices between 7% and 8%, and an annual rise in utilities between 12% and 14%, driven by the energy bills that the Prime Minister said would actually go down by $275. And prior to the election, the Prime Minister said Australians would be better off under a Labor government. Why did the Prime Minister not tell the truth?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you.
Order.
Thank you. And I note Senator O'Sullivan has used wages in one of his questions. He's used energy bills in another one of his questions, both areas where those opposite either voted against it or kept wages low for an entire decade, and now come in here and all of a sudden they care about working people's wages.
Minister.
What a surprise after a decade.
Minister Gallagher, resume your seat. Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Minister, please continue.
This fake or feigned kind of horror at wages policy. You know, what an absolute joke. A deliberate design feature of your economic architecture was to keep wages low, and now they're increasing. And now they're increasing for the first time in a decade. We're seeing promising wages growth to assist people with some of those increases in costs of living. That is our plan. We are implementing our economic plan to support households through this high period of inflation.
Thank you, Minister. Before I call Senator Payman, I'm going to remind the chamber that your interjections are disorderly, and towards the end of the minister's response then, your interjections were drowning out the minister. Now, that's incredibly disorderly. Senator Payman.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Social Services, Senator Farrell. The Albanese government recognises that many people in Australia are facing cost of living pressures right now. Can the Minister please outline how the passage of the Social Services Strengthening the Safety Net Bill in the Senate yesterday is helping to deliver on the Albanese government's $14.6 billion cost of living package to give some relief for Australians on some of the lowest incomes?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Payman for her question. I know she has a deep interest in this area of Albanese government policy. And yes, I can give you some information about that, because the Albanese government has not wasted a single day, not one, delivering on our positive agenda to improve the lives of all Australians. We know cost of living pressures are having an impact on family budgets right across the country. That's why in the 2023-24 budget, we committed $14.6 billion of targeted cost of living relief. I'll repeat that figure for you, Senator Ciccone, $14.6 billion. $9.5 billion of this package was designed to provide additional support for Australians who are living on the lowest incomes. And yesterday, the government strengthening the safety net bill passed the parliament. The bill delivers more support for those relying on student and working age payments, for many single parents, for older Australians facing additional barriers to work, and for many who receive support from Commonwealth rent assistance. These are responsible changes that target support to those doing it the toughest without adding to inflation. With the successful passage of this bill, the rates of job seeker, youth allowance and eligible working age and student payments will rise by $40 a fortnight from the 20th of September. This increase will be combined with the indexation for those payments which will be applied on the same day. This means a single job seeker with no dependents will actually receive an increase of $56 a fortnight. This package of measures
Minister. The
will
time
make...
for answering has expired. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
So an important part of the package is the increase in social services payments to some of the most vulnerable in our community. Can the Minister please provide some additional details on how these Australians will be better supported with cost of living challenges as a direct result of this package?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and once again thank Senator Payman for her insightful first question. The bill that passed the Senate yesterday expands eligibility for the higher rate of job seeker to include single recipients aged over 55 years who've been on income support for 9 or more months. This is because we know older Australians face a number of additional barriers when they are looking for work. We're also increasing support for single parents by extending eligibility for the parenting payment, the single one, to parents with the youngest child under 14. I know it can be tough for single parents who are overwhelmingly women to balance caring responsibilities and full-time work, studying or looking for work. As a result of these Albanese government changes and the great work of the Minister in this area, Minister Rishworth, more than 57,000 single parents will be better off.
Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Many of the most vulnerable Australians have been struggling with the cost of housing, which has arisen from a decade of inaction on housing by the former Liberal National Government, aka Coalition. Can the Minister please outline for the Senate how the Albanese government's social services strengthening...
Order. Continue, Senator Payman.
Can the Minister please outline for the Senate how the Albanese government's social services strengthening the safety net bill is helping these Australians with cost of rents?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Payman for her second supplementary question. And of course, you've nailed it there, Senator Payman, because and the reaction of those opposite gives the clue, because the government is providing additional support to recipients of the Commonwealth Rent Assistance with the largest increase in over 30 years. Maximum rates are increasing by 15% plus indexation. This is one way that the Albanese government is addressing housing pressures after a decade of neglect under the former Liberal and National Party government. It's part of our comprehensive package of housing measures which sees us working with housing ministers right across the country, in contrast to the former government, of course. I call on everyone in this place to work with the government in a constructive manner to support our housing agenda.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. President, my question is also to Senator Farrell, however, in this case in his capacity as the Minister representing the Minister for Resources. I refer the Minister to the recent federal court judgment which set aside the selection of the Napandi site near Kimber for the proposed National Radioactive Waste Management Facility. Will the Albanese government appeal this decision? And if a decision has not yet been made, when will the government determine whether it will appeal the decision?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Birmingham for his question and the issue which he has raised, which of course affects part of his own state of South Australia, and in particular the selection of Kimber as a site for the waste depository centre. Look, I suppose the simple answer to your question is that this matter obviously is a matter in the courts, before the courts, and of course we don't generally comment on these matters when they're judicial matters are proceeding. So, I mean, that's the first point to make. The principle of judicial review is an important process which the government fully supports, and my recollection is that when this issue was debated in the previous Parliament, that the provisions for judicial review were one of the things that the then Minister inserted into the processes. Well, Senator Canavan says no, but look, if I'm wrong on that, I'll correct it, Senator Canavan. But my recollection is that as part of the agreement to get the processes through this place, the judicial review was inserted into the provisions. But as I say, if I'm wrong on that, I'll come back and correct it.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, considering the serious implications of this decision, particularly for nuclear medicines like cancer treatments, how will you ensure swiftly that certainty is given for their continued development in Australia? And given your comments then about judicial review, does the government reserve the right to legislate a remedy so that the site at Napandi can proceed as planned?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Birmingham for his first supplementary question. Now, we understand that the issue of how we deal with particularly low-level nuclear waste that's often stored in hospitals around the country has been a contentious issue for a very long period of time. And of course, one of the possibilities was that the site at Kimber would have resolved that issue. But can I say this? Australia's radioactive waste is currently being safely managed in temporary storage arrangements right around the country. Well, they are being safely managed right now, and you have nothing to worry. You have nothing to worry
Senator
about.
Wong. Keep
Sorry.
going. Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, it's time. Second supplementary, Senator Birmingham.
President, does the minister acknowledge the increasing urgency of resolving this issue? Does the government support proceeding with the proposed site at Napandi for low and intermediate radioactive storage, given the importance to our nuclear medicine industries and also given the additional obligations Australia has committed to under the AUKUS arrangements?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And look, my recollection, and again I may not be correct in this, but this whole process started with a Labor minister. Yes, don't look so surprised, Senator Cash. My recollection was that it was Simon Crean, the late Simon Crean, who started the discussion about how we deal with this serious issue of low-level nuclear waste. So we have.
Order. Order.
Well, if you stop interrupting me, I can answer your question. We understand the importance of this issue. We do say.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Wong, representing the Environment and Water Minister. Senator Wong, at the election, your government made a clear promise to deliver the Murray-Darling Basin Plan on time and in full, including the 450 gigalitres to South Australia and the environment. We know, of course, that only 2.7% of that 450 gigalitres has been delivered to date. Now we hear the Water Minister is saying that on-time delivery is not possible and will be seeking a delay of the deadline of the plan. Why did the Labor Party and your Prime Minister make a promise to South Australia they could not keep?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister Wong.
Thank you for the question. As you would know, Senator Hanson-Young, there are this party in government and in opposition has been campaigning for the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, has purchased water for the environment, and has sought to progress this. And the reality is that we had 10 years, not only of inaction, but deliberate sabotage particularly by the National Party of this plan. Now, the senator rightly asks, why has the government had to take the positions had to take?
Senator Davey. Senator Davey, order. If you wish to speak on this issue, you can find time at other places in the sitting calendar. Minister Wong, please continue.
Minister Plibersek has been upfront about this, Senator. Of course, we are deeply committed to implementing the plan because, as we always have been, and as you know, the majority of water that has already been delivered under the plan has been obtained under Labor governments, the past Labor governments. Well, I'll take the interjection. I know that those opposite seem to believe that you can continue to do business as usual in an era where we see not only the degradation of the river, but climate change. Yes, well, look, the science says, go have a look at what the Murray-Darling Basin Commission says. Now, what Minister Plibersek has made clear but when she sought advice from the Murray-Darling Basin Commission is that the advice she has received from the independent body is that because of what has happened under the previous government, it is not possible for us to deliver the plan in the timeframe that we had hoped. And as a South Australian, I can say to you, I am deeply disappointed by that. I'm deeply disappointed by that. And I'm deeply disappointed by the politics of those
Minister.
opposite on this issue over decades.
Expired. Senator Hanson-Young, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. South Australians, frankly, are sick and tired of politicians passing the buck on the Murray River. They want to see the water and they want to see it delivered. It's been promised, it should be delivered. The environment needs it. Will you buy the water that South Australia has been promised?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister Wong.
The Minister has said that she's gone through a process consulting with community about alternatives to water purchasing. As she has said, that she wants to look at all options, but it will be hard to meet targets without some purchasing. I'm advised that the Minister is in the process of buying 49 gigalitres to close off another part of the plan. That process will take about 9 months. 9 months? Well, 9 years, and you delivered, was it 2.7%? Was that the figure? I can't recall if Senator Hanson-Young's figures are right.
Order.
But you delivered a fraction of what you promised in nearly a decade, because Senator McKenzie and the Nationals have always wanted to sabotage this plan. And you know how we know that? Because she came into the Senate and tried to do exactly that. And the government, the then government, had the Libs and the Nationals voting a different way.
Thank you, Senator. Order on my left. Order. Order. Senator Ayres. This is a question that Senator Hanson-Young is asking. I would ask both sides of the chamber to respect that the question be asked in silence and the Minister, when she responds, be heard in silence. As I just reminded Senator Davey, if you wish to make a contribution on this matter, find another time in the sitting calendar, not question time. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, President. We've heard the Minister's request for delay. My question to Senator Wong is, how many more years do South Australians have to wait before we get the water we need, the water we were promised, and the water the environment deserves?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister Wong.
Senator Hanson-Young, and you and I have campaigned both on this issue for many years. It is not fair to use the formulation you just did about the Minister requesting delay.
Order.
The Minister has been provided with a report by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority that shows there is no pathway to deliver on time because of Senator McKenzie and her colleagues in the National Party who refused to allow voluntary buybacks and never delivered the water that they said they would. That's the reality.
Minister Wong,
Senator Hanson-Young,
please resume your seat. Senator Davey and Senator McKenzie, I've asked for order at least 3 times, and I've named you twice, Senator Davey. It's not a request, it's an order. Listen in silence. Minister Wong, please continue.
I was, pushing back on Senator Hanson-Young's use of the word, I can't recall the phrase she used, but my point is the advice, the independent advice that we have received is that there is no pathway to deliver on time. As someone who has worked on this and purchased a lot of water, all of which was opposed by those opposite, and we'll do it again. Yep, there you go, Senator McKenzie. I wish we had not had 10 years, almost 10 years of a government who didn't want to do anything on the Murray-Darling.
Senator Grogan.
My question is to the Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher. In 2022, Australia was ranked 43rd in the world for gender equality, according to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report, which examines the gap between men and women in 146 different countries. Can the Minister confirm that this embarrassing position is a reflection on a decade of neglect and gender equality in Australia by the former federal government, and a failure to move the dial on gender equality and deliver policies that genuinely supported women? Can the Minister also update the Senate on any improvements to our ranking following the election of the Albanese government?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Grogan for the question and for her career long work on supporting women and gender equality across the country, particularly in South Australia. I can assist you, Senator Grogan. The last gender gap report from the World Economic Forum shows that since the Albanese Labor government took office, Australia's World Gender Equality ranking has jumped from 43rd to 26. We were 43 in 2022 and even lower in 2021 when we were ranked 50. In 2023 we are now 26 out of 143 countries, and our increased score is entirely due to the increased number of women in Parliament and the increased number of women in Cabinet since the May 22 election. The report itself notes this. Compared to the previous edition, 13 countries have improved, led by Australia, New Zealand and Philippines. Australia and New Zealand had a considerable increase in the share of women ministers. This is the biggest increase for Australia in the history of the index since it began in 2001. And this index is important. It measures the gap between women and men, as Senator Grogan outlined in her question. And it uses 4 sub-measures like political empowerment, economic participation, education and health. And the index is calculated as a score and a global rank. I think, not only is it important that we are continuing to challenge and raise our international rankings, but of course it's not only increasing representation of women in this place or around the Cabinet table, which does require deliberate action, it's also in the policy agenda that the Albanese government has implemented in the first 14 months of this government and will continue to over the duration of this term.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
Thank you. That was very interesting, Minister. Going up to 26th is a significant improvement. The index shows that women's political representation and participation is a key element of achieving gender equality. Can the Minister outline how increased representation of women in Parliament and in the government and in the Cabinet, as she referenced in her...
Order across the chamber.
How those...
Just a moment, Senator Grogan. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator Wong and Senator Hume. Senator Grogan, I am going to allow you to finish your question because I had to call order.
Thank you. So can the Minister outline how increased representation of women in Parliament, in the government and in the Cabinet makes a difference in the policies and decisions of government and helps the government deliver on its commitment to drive gender equality and support women?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Grogan for the supplementary. Better gender representation does lead to better outcomes. We know this. It's documented time and time again, and this government hasn't wasted any time in delivering crucial gender equality reforms after a decade of stalled progress under the former government. But it's not only does it increased representation of women mean we've improved our global standing, with more women around the decision-making table, and ultimately that will flow on to better decisions for women. And if I could just point out the gender assessment process that we're putting through our budget, which means that all of the new measures that the government looks at will be looked at with an understanding at that table about what the impacts are for men and for women, and whether there are disproportionate impacts, which allows better decision making. And I do wonder whether, if this had been in place when Parents Next program was put in place, where we saw a disproportionate impact on disadvantaged young women, in particular single
Thank
parents,
you, Minister.
whether there
The time
would have
for
been
answering has expired. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you, Senator Gallagher. That's very interesting points you make there. Could you maybe outline for us now how the Albanese government will continue to work towards achieving gender equality and improving outcomes for women in Australia, and also update us on how the government is working with Australians from across the community to design and deliver this important work, and what it is that you're hearing when you're out in the community across Australia about what is important to women?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Senator Grogan, for the supplementary. While we are very pleased with the improvement of Australia's position on the global stage, there is much work to do here nationally, which is why we are developing a national strategy to achieve gender equality, to continue to drive improvements to gender equality across Australia. And we are listening to women from across the community to develop this strategy. We've had feedback from over 3,000 individuals and organisations through the process, and I've been privileged to sit with around many of the roundtables and discussions with women and girls to hear from them directly about their priorities. The strategy will also be informed by the advice from the Women's Economic Equality Task Force, which is due to provide its report to me shortly. So there is a lot of work to be done, but we are determined to make a difference and to improve gender equality in this country, because not only does that improve the lives of women, it improves the lives of all of us.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Australian Tax Office data shows that for every $3 a Tasmanian man retires with, a Tasmanian woman retires with 2. Your government and I both agree that the super should be paid on paid parental leave, and we need to make sure we're doing it in a way and at a time when the budget can afford it. The cost of paying super on paid parental leave would be about $200 million a year. Congratulations again on the $20 billion surplus in last year's budget. Does the government still insist that the budget cannot afford to close the gap on retirement savings and start to pay super on paid parental leave?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Tyrrell for her question and agree with her about the need to improve the women's superannuation balances. This has been a key priority. I know Senator McAllister has worked on this in previous terms of previous parliamentary terms, with chairing a very important Senate committee into this specific matter, into women's retirement incomes more generally. This is something the Treasurer and I and others across the government have said. This is something we want to do when we are in a position to do it. I would point out to Senator Tyrrell that the budget is still forecasting across the forward estimates deficits. So we did have a very significant improvement, and we are, very pleased with the outcome of the first surplus in 15 years. That will help us repair the budget. It will help with our debt management, meaning we'll have to borrow less, pay less interest, so it does have flow-on impacts across the budget years. But the budget is still got more pressures coming towards it than away from it, if I can put it that way. And so these are matters that we look at carefully. I think you've seen in the first 2 budgets our commitment to address some of the economic inequality that women face. We're doing it in terms of industrial relations reform, so part of the issue is women earn less, so if we can increase wages, that flows on into their superannuation balances. Having flexible work arrangements that allows women to participate and earn money, particularly while they're doing through the caring years, and particularly the motherhood penalty that women pay. So all of these areas are before the government. I think we've put a pretty good down payment on some of the initiatives, but there is more work to do, Senator Tyrrell, and this is something that the Labor Party has been looking at and will continue to look at. And when we can, we will do it.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Thank you. Senator Lambie and I have worked with the Greens and with Senator Pocock to make you an offer that will see the government collect, on average, an extra $500 million each year from oil and gas companies. The cost of super unpaid parental leave is estimated at around $200 million a year. If you're concerned we aren't collecting enough money to pay super unpaid parental leave, and you're also against collecting the money, can you really say it's what you want?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and thanks, Senator Tyrrell, for the question. Well, I would say that the budget weighs up a whole range of different needs, and there isn't a shortage of areas where people are coming to me as the Minister for Finance wanting extra investment, whether it be in the NDIS, where people have seen the pressure there, in the health budget, the work that's underway in education, in the areas of defence, in managing Australia's debt. The budget has to do all of these things. So when we work through the budget process, we have to weigh up a whole range of things on the revenue side, on the expenditure side, and we will do that. I think in relation, they're unrelated in the sense of how you put the question together. We've made some decisions around PRRT, but at the same time we are making a lot of room to invest in women and women's economic equality, and I'll get the report from the task force soon, and that will inform further decisions.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell's second supplementary.
Thank you. I hear all that, but Labor supported paying super on PPL in 2021 when we had an $80 billion deficit. Labor doesn't support it now with a $20 billion surplus. Can the minister nominate any figure for how big the surplus would need to be before it's ready to honour its pre-election commitment to pay super on PPL?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Well, in relation to the surplus, and we are pleased to have the first surplus in 15 years, it is important, but it is in the previous financial year. So it cannot be used to fund things going forward in an ongoing sense. So that's why I drew your attention to the fact that the budget remains in deficit, and I think in structural deficit, so we've got a fair bit of work to do around that, about how we make room for new investments. And as I said, there's no shortage of good ideas, really good ideas that we would like to fund. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. And I think when we try and put the budget together, we have to make a series of decisions. And you'll see in the last budget, we've made a number that hopefully will improve the lives of women, including in the payment system, including with some of our housing policies in a whole range of areas, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Senator Wong. It was revealed last week that the Australian Antarctic Division needs to now slash $25 million, or an astonishing 16% of its operating budget, from its activities. Minister, as a result of these cuts under the Albanese government, how many jobs, contract, part-time and full-time, will be lost? And from the 56 of them now apparently identified on an internal list, how many different Antarctic science programs, projects and research activities will you gut?
Minister Wong.
The party that eroded the public.
So, there are so many ways in which one could respond to that. Given what those opposite did, I will answer the question, Senator Birmingham. Thank you for the advice. Given what those opposite did to the public service, but also given the fact that on the one hand they want us to spend more, but on the other hand they want us to spend less. So Senator Duniam should probably speak to Senator Hume. But the advice I have is this, that despite what those opposite have been claiming, there has been no government decision to cut spending to the Antarctic program. So that's the advice I have, Senator. We are continuing to roll out the $804 million invested in the Antarctic program to the end of the decade. I'm advised that the $25 million figure referenced in media reports reflects the Antarctic Division's internal management of its own budget. Oh wow, that's There's spooky
Order.
music over there, isn't it? But I would make this point. In the past, when I had relevant portfolios, obviously visited. Whilst I didn't get to Antarctica, I did visit the Antarctic Division. They do very good work. It is a very important part of not only Australia's future but Australia's legacy in terms of the work that we have done both at the scientific level but also in terms of international law. And we understand how important the program is, and I understand that the Minister recently was in Tasmania and addressed all staff.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Given apparently there are no cuts, in an email to staff on the 10th of July, just 11 days after Minister Plibersek visited the AADs, the Minister said, to talk up their work, the AAD Director said in an email that it is my expectation that we won't be able to afford all the current positions, and I recognise that this will be hard, end of quote. Then on the 28th of July, she again told staff that we will need to carefully consider our current staffing levels. Given the Director's statements, how can the Minister and her department possibly claim there will be no job losses?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong. Minister Wong, beg your pardon.
Thank you. Well, again, the advice I have is that there has been no government decision to cut spending to the Antarctic program. So if there's any... Well, yeah, Senator Duniam, I can only give you the advice I have received. If there is anything further that I have in relation to that, I obviously would, as I always do, seek to provide that to the Senate. But that is the advice from the Portfolio Minister. I appreciate that Senator Duniam wants to run a political issue. I'm providing him with the advice that I have received from the Portfolio Minister.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
Far from a political issue. On the ABC last week, UNSW Antarctic oceanography expert Jan Zika said cuts to the AAD were catastrophic. Similarly, the CPSU in Tasmania, Zach Batchelor, said that AAD staff now feel that crucial scientific research is not safe and that everyone is scratching their head trying to understand this budget shortfall. Minister, aren't both Associate Professor Zika and Mr Batchelor right about the devastating impacts of the pursuit of this $25 million worth of cuts?
Minister Wong.
Come to a branch meeting, comrade.
Well, I'm very pleased that Senator Duniam does think it's a good thing that trade unions speak up for their members, and maybe he should have a chat to Senator Cash. What I would say is the premise of the question is incorrect. The advice that I have from the Minister is as I've outlined. So I think everything thereafter is probably more akin to a speech by Senator Duniam than a question of a minister. I would say that Australia obviously has had a very proud history in relation to Antarctica. We are a global leader in Antarctic
Minister
science.
Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Brown and Senator Duniam. Order. Order. Minister, please continue.
Australia remains a global leader on Antarctic science, operations, environmental protection and the Antarctic Treaty System. We continue to have a strong presence in the Australian Antarctic Territory and fulfil our obligations under the treaty, and we recognise the importance
Thank you,
of this
Minister.
work.
Senator Babet.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Minister Gallagher. Minister, you recently announced your government's plan for a national digital ID by mid-2024, thereabouts. There is significant concern in the community around this potential rollout. Australians are concerned about their privacy, their data security and the potential for misuse in the future. Minister, it has been said that this digital ID will also be accessed by private corporations and institutions. Can you confirm, if you know, which private corporations or institutions will be granted access to personal identification information? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Babet for the question and for the heads up on a question about digital ID. The short answer to Senator Babette's question is none in relation to the digital ID, because and I think there is a level of education we have to do about what the digital ID program is, but it is, and I welcome the Coalition's strong support for this important reform. I've seen Mr Fletcher out strongly endorsing it, and so I look forward to working across the chamber to deliver this important reform, but it will be a voluntary, so that's important, a voluntary system, secure, convenient way for Australians to verify their identity online. As we know, Australians are frequently asked to verify their ID for various activities such as changing jobs or renting a house or taking out a phone plan, and of course many government services where they are required to do so. We have our MyGov ID system, so it's already in place now and used by many people. The next step is to put in place legislation to regulate that system. So we have 10.5 million government digital IDs that are being used to access 130 services provided by almost 40 government agencies now. But it's got robust protections, consent rules to ensure personal information is protected through this, but it is actually only a way of verifying identity. So it actually gives more control to the owner of that information, who keeps that information, but it's used to verify your identity. It's not a card or a number. No one holds the information. In order to get a digital ID, you provide a certain amount of information to be verified, but you are the retainer of that information. And so, in many ways, that should address some of those concerns that you've raised.
Senator Babette, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. So basically there you've said that people's personal information, or this digital ID system in whatever shape it takes, private institutions, private businesses, private corporations will never ever be able to access this information to find out particular details about people out in the community. Is that correct?
Thank you, Senator Babette. Minister Gallagher.
So, well, private organisations already hold a lot of information about people, and in fact, in some cases are required to hold that information, whether it be, in your 100-point check for your open a banking account. So these organisations already hold a lot of information. The idea with a digital ID system and the interoperability between a public and a private network, we are looking to phase it, but obviously this is legislation that will come to this chamber. I have no doubt it'll go through a committee process as well. We're going to release an exposure draft, hopefully around September, so that people will be able to involve themselves in that. But the idea is once you're verified, that gives you access to a whole range of services. So it's about proving your identity, being verified, and then using that verification to access programs that actually reduces the amount of information you have to provide to other organisations.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Babette, second supplementary.
Thank you. Now, Minister, you've said that it's not going to be compulsory, and I hope that's right, but the COVID vaccine wasn't compulsory either, and look what happened there. Take it or you don't get a job, right? So what guarantee do we have from your government that this will 100% not be compulsory? Will you write it into the legislation itself in black and white? This is not compulsory forever and always, the end.
Thank you, Senator Babette. Minister Gallagher.
We're certainly making it clear that it's voluntary, and as part of that, government has to maintain systems that allows people to use and engage with the government without a digital ID. The digital ID, and they're currently doing it, 10.5 million people or million accounts that are used across 130 different programs. So I think people are understanding, I think because of all the breaches we've had, about the need to look at secure ways to retain your own information and put strong privacy arrangements around it. And I think because people are so connected and using devices all the time, they're more comfortable with ideas around digital ID, but it's absolutely voluntary. Nobody can force anybody to have a digital identity at all, and government systems will have to be maintained and should be maintained to ensure that people are able to interact with government as they choose.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt. I know the Minister was in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales last week 18 months on from the floods that devastated this area, how is the Albanese government continuing to support communities with their ongoing recovery, and what has been done to mitigate the impact of future flood events in this area?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Sheldon, who I know only recently again visited a number of flood-affected regions in his capacity as Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery. And now, nearly 18 months on, it is, since those dreadful floods hit the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales. And inevitably, a disaster of this scale will take a long recovery time. But the Albanese government is standing with the communities affected as they continue to recover, and that won't change. The Albanese government has made $1.6 billion in payments directly to individuals and families impacted by the February flood event last year in New South Wales. And that's in addition to the jointly funded disaster recovery funding arrangements, which have seen the Albanese government and the New South Wales government invest about $1.2 billion in the Northern Rivers for a series of home buybacks, road upgrades, grants for farmers and businesses, accommodation packages and other support for councils, home repairs, concessional loans and freight subsidies. On Friday last week, I visited the Northern Rivers once again, and just outside Coraki, I was joined by Mayors Robert Mustoe from Richmond Valley, Sharon Cadwallader from Ballina and Chris Cherry from Tweed to announce Tranche 2 of the Northern Rivers Recovery and Resilience Program. It's important that, while we continue to aid the region's recovery, we also put measures in place to prevent these events creating such devastation in the future. So on Friday, another 20 projects worth $100 million from the Albanese government have been committed from this fund, on top of the 16 projects worth $50 million that we announced in February. These projects span every council area in the Northern Rivers and were recommended based on research by CSIRO and supported by the New South Wales government, who undertook due diligence checks. They include road and bridge raising, flood pump station upgrades and nature-based mitigation strategies, among other things. The Albanese government is making these investments in the Northern Rivers because we know these communities need them.
Has expired. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Now, Minister, I know that since the floods in the Northern Rivers, we've also seen major flooding events in almost every state and territory. How does the Albanese government continue to support other communities impacted by floods?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. Since October last year, we have, of course, seen flood events in Western Australia, the Northern Territory, South Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, Tasmania and Victoria. And in the past 18 months, more than $1.8 billion in direct Commonwealth payments have been made to individuals and families impacted by other natural disasters, as in apart from those February New South Wales floods. And we continue to work with these states and territories on a range of measures costing billions more to help these communities with their ongoing recovery. Just one example, and I know this is something that many Western Australian senators are familiar with, in the Kimberley region, work is progressing on rebuilding the Fitzroy River Bridge, and we're working alongside the Cook government to deliver over $100 million to repair flood-impacted homes, public housing and roads. The package also provides support for temporary accommodation for people who are displaced and accommodation for facilities for people who are undertaking community recovery and clean-up. We'll keep working with these communities to ensure they get what they need.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. As we move from 3 years of successive La Nina events to a possible El Nino, what is the Albanese government going to do to prepare for a change in conditions this high-risk weather season coming upon us?
Minister Watt.
Thanks again, Senator Sheldon. While we continue to support communities who are recovering from last year's floods, we're also planning for the first significant fire season since 2019-20. We certainly don't want to see a repeat of Black Summer, where the then coalition government ignored the warnings they were given and failed to prepare. We know that multiple years of rainfall has created significant vegetation growth ahead of what looks to be a dry, hot summer. It's a reminder that we all need to be doing bushfire prep at home and keeping an eye on fire danger ratings and fire bans. Through the Albanese government's new Disaster Ready Fund, we are co-investing $95 million in bushfire mitigation and resilience projects across the country. The Albanese government is also convening a National Emergency Management Ministers meeting at the end of the month to ensure that all levels of government are fully prepared for the coming fire season. We're working with commissioners and chief officers to understand fire risk for the coming season and ensure that resource arrangements, including aerial firefighting assets, are in place. We will be
thank
prepared.
you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Nampijinka-Price.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Gallagher. Does the Albanese government support the establishment of a treaty between the Australian government and the Indigenous Australians?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinka-Price. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Nampijinka-Price for the question, and the government supports the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and in particular our focus and our priority is on a referendum later this year, so every Australian has the opportunity to vote on constitutional recognition for Australia's First Peoples through constitutional recognition through that vote, and for a voice to our national parliament. That is what the government supports. That is what arrangements we are putting in place, and the whole reason is because it's a generous offer made by those who attended Uluru in 2017 and who authored the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And it's about making a practical difference to the lives of First Nations people in this country. There is a recognition that the system that we have in place now is not delivering the outcomes that we want, whether it be in health, whether it be in housing, whether it be in education, whether it be in justice, whether it be in early childhood outcomes. These are the issues that we are focused on, improving outcomes for First Nations people, and an acknowledgement that the system as it is set up now is not working, recognising our proud history going back some 65,000 years, recognising First Nations people in our country's birth certificate, and ensuring that we are responding to the Uluru Statement, which calls for a voice to our national parliament so that we can make a difference and shift the dial and try and improve those outcomes that every single one of us in this place must surely recognise are not delivering the outcomes that we want.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinka-Price, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Given your failure to address the very specific question asked, I ask again. Does the Albanese government support the establishment of a treaty between the Australian government and Indigenous Australians?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinka-Price.
Thank you. Well, I did answer the question. It may be that Senator Nampijinka-Price doesn't like the answer, but I said the government supports the Uluru Statement from the Heart. That was in my first answer to the question. So that is the answer I gave to that. The first question, it's the answer I give now. And our focus, as Senator Nampijinka-Price knows, is on the referendum that will be held later this year to recognise in our Constitution Australia's First Peoples, and through a voice, create a voice to our national parliament to deliver the outcomes, or the improved outcomes, that I would hope that all of us in this chamber want to see. And you know, we know that you've got a constant campaign to undermine the work that's being done on this referendum. We understand that, but we remain resolute and focused on delivering the voice through a vote through the referendum later this year.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinka-Price, second supplementary.
Minister, you can wear the T-shirt, you can tweet the tweet, you can even attend the rally. Why are you now being so tricky and evasive? Why won't you be upfront with the Australian people and give an honest and direct answer regarding the Albanese Labor government's commitment to a treaty?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinka-Price. Minister Gallagher.
Well, Senator Nampijinka-Price personalises this, but as Senator McCarthy says time and time again, this is not about me, it's not about you, it's not about my tweets or your obsession with my social media accounts.
Senator
It's
Cash.
not about any of us as individuals. It's not about any of us as individuals. This is about a bigger thing. It's about the country. It's about the nation. It's about the way we walk together. It's about bringing a country together, recognising our past, improving outcomes.
I'm waiting for silence across the chamber. Minister. The Minister has finished. Senator Ciccone.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, in light of the answers that we've just received and questions, could you please remind this Senate the reasons for the voice to the Parliament and how it's conceived and driven by Indigenous Australian communities?
Minister Wong. Sorry, Senator Ciccone.
Could the Minister, President, also advise how this year's referendum offers an opportunity to achieve progress towards a better future for all Australians? And does the Minister have any concerns about the risks towards this progress?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Ciccone for that question and for his sincere and ongoing interest in reconciliation and the project of building a better future for all Australians.
Order.
And it's a good question, because those opposite might like to recall that the idea of a voice came directly from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Order! Order! Minister, please resume your seat. Order! Senator Cash, I've just called the chamber to order. That includes you. And Senator Henderson. And Senator Hughes. Order! Order across the chamber, but particularly on my left. I'm calling the Minister to continue her response. I expect her to be heard in silence. Minister Wong.
The call for the voice did not come from politicians. The call for the voice came from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In 2017, after many years of work and countless discussions in every part of this country, nearly 250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders and elders.
Senators, Senator Ayres, I have just called the chamber to order, and the minute I called the Minister, the disorder continued. It's disrespectful. I'm asking for silence. Minister Wong.
150 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders and elders endorsed the statement from the heart calling for recognition in the Constitution through a voice. The voice is about recognising our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our Constitution and paying respect to 65,000 years of culture and tradition. It is also about listening. It's about listening to the advice our First Nations people will give on matters that affect their lives so that governments make better decisions.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senators, Senator Watt, I've just sat the Minister down. Senators, I remind all of you, you have the opportunity at any time in the sitting calendar to make your views known. Question time is not the time for these unruly and disrespectful interjections. Minister Wong, please continue.
This is about government making better decisions, and it is an idea driven by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, supported by 8 in 10 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And we know, surely we all know, the current approach is broken, where we see First Nations people, a life expectancy 8 years shorter than non-Indigenous Australian, worse rates of disease and infant mortality, a suicide rate twice as high, fewer opportunities. I'm surprised, Senator McGrath, you would interject on these points. Fewer opportunities for education and training, and the voice is our best chance to fix this. When governments listen to people.
Please resume your seat. Senator McGrath. That was outrageous and completely disorderly. I've asked for order across the chamber, particularly on my left, but also on my right. Senator Wong is entitled to be heard in silence, and I should not have to remind all of you how to conduct yourselves in this place. Minister Wong, please continue.
When governments listen to people about issues that affect them, they make better decisions, get better results and deliver better value for money. And that is why all Australians, not just politicians in this place, will have a chance to say we can do better
thank you,
and
Minister.
we must.
The time for responding. I'm waiting to call Senator Ciccone. I'm not quite sure who that was on my right, but that was incredibly disrespectful. Senator McGrath. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary. Senator Ciccone, please resume your seat. Senator McGrath, your interjections are rude and disorderly and disrespectful. Senator McGrath, I am ordering you to be silent, not to have a debate with me. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, why has the Prime Minister, the government and other leaders decided to support First Nations communities in seeking to achieve constitutional recognition through a voice to Parliament? And what message does the Albanese government have to those with political platforms who have not yet decided to support the voice?
I'm waiting for silence. Minister Wong.
The Albanese government supports the voice because we believe it's important to give people a say. Give people a say on issues that affect them and to give us all the chance to make a practical difference that improves lives. We also believe we have an opportunity together to bring people together, to bring about a better future and the opportunity for a unifying moment for our country. Unfortunately, rather than looking at the opportunity for the nation, we see the opposition still taking the approach of Mr Morrison to look for opportunity for themselves. And that is why they want to talk about everything other than what a voice will do. Because they actually know Australians don't find the current situation experienced by Indigenous Australians acceptable.
McKenzie.
So I say to all senators, the future of our country is more important than our political futures, and I ask senators to reflect on whether they want to use the soul and fabric of our nation as a political
battleground. Responding has expired. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary. Senator Watt, order.
Thank you, President. What lessons can we take from history as we seek to make that progress for a better future for Australians? And can the Minister please remind the Senate about the efforts to achieve reform in Australia in the past?
Senator Hughes. Minister.
I invite the opposition to look to a shared national interest, not just their own narrow political interests. And I know this would... I invite the opposition to overcome their legacy of exploiting fear to put political fights ahead of national progress. Let's have a look at that legacy.
Minister Wong,
Mr Abbott said Australia would become an economic wasteland if we acted on climate change.
Minister, please continue.
Mr Joyce said action on climate change would mean Australians would pay over $100 for a roast. Mr Morrison said electric vehicles will end the weekend. And Senator Cash, there's so much from Senator Cash.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Minister Wong, order. I have a Senator... Order. Senator Cash and Senator Watt. Senator Scarr.
I fail to see how climate change can in any way be relevant to a primary question asked about the voice.
Senator Scarr, the question went to history. And perhaps, senators, if there was silence in this place, we could all hear the answer. Senator Scarr, I'm not inviting you to respond. Minister Wong.
And Senator Cash, for Senator Cash, there was a lot of options on the scare campaign. I know you're sensitive on this, but one of the best ones was that she said, Senator Cash said, laws for secure jobs and better pay would leave supermarket shelves bare. Then, of course, there is Mr Dutton.
Senator McGrath.
Mr Dutton, who not only didn't even attend the apology, but said it would open the government up to serious damages claims. We all know what you're up to because that's what you always do.
Resume your seat.